Hello there, and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer, and I am joined, as I so very often am, by my close associate, Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Matthew Bevilacqua and Sean Gismonti of the Terrace get together? That's right, we are going to start overseeing the trade of dodgy stocks, and then have a harebrained scheme to kill our line manager to grab the attention of the boss. One of us is going to get tracked into a shed in a public park and assassinated. And then along the way, we'll talk a little bit about lower league Scottish football.
I must admit, I didn't know who they were.
The Sopranos.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Do you know the two guys that Chrissy has working for him when they're trying to push out Wibbistics?
Yes.
And they end up, they have a scheme where they decide to kill Chrissy to get the attention of Tony.
Yes, I'll be honest, I immediately thought that these must be people from real life. And that's not the case. Now that makes sense.
Yes, aye. So it's always bad. We get off to a bad start if I come up with one of these and you don't laugh. So there we go. Might go back and re-record another intro. We probably won't. We'll stick with Matthew Bevilacqua and Sean Gismonti. Hopefully, there's a listener at home who has watched The Sopranos, remembers the name of the characters, and yes,
nodding
sagely along from their whiskey room or wherever it is they listen to their podcast. And actually, I don't think there'll be any of our listeners who have a whiskey room. I imagine they are listening to this podcast on the bus to their job in the call centre. That's where they are.
Who would have a whiskey room in Scotland? That's just uncommon in general.
Ewan Taylor.
I don't think he would. I think Lord Willie Hockey would have a whiskey room.
I wouldn't surprise me if he done away with the Queen's Park women's team to turn to use the money to build an extra sort of a mini distillery and tour built into that big royal box.
He's built a particularly expensive bookshelf, but to do that, he has to disband the Queen's Park women's team.
But the funny you said, like Dom Thomas has just been sold earlier this week, so maybe that's what's happened with that. But Shaughan, while the Scottish Cup will have dominated most people's attention over the weekend, there were still 4 games that took place in League One and League Two, and we are going to talk about all 4 of them, and as well as briefly touching on the midweek games. So I acknowledge my performance in last week's podcast was very poor. That was pointed out to me by a couple of listeners. Thank you very much. And I promise I will do better this time. It's slightly more than our patented 3-game podcast. We haven't patented the 4 games. So if anything turns up in your RSS feed from an inferior podcast that does a game from the Premiership, Championship, League 1 and League 2, you know where they got their idea from. I just haven't had the chance to go to the bail bonds office yet, the patent office, to get that sorted.
I was going to say, I don't know if the bail bonds office is where you post patents.
Yes, that's the... Let's be honest, if you have to visit the bail bonds office, something's gone horrendously wrong. If you visit the Patenton office, then something's gone right. If you're visiting the bail bonds office, then you're in grave danger.
I've always suspected that a bail bonds office is something that's very particular to America.
Yes, there's a guy who used to compete in the WWE called the Lethal Weapon, Steve Blackman. I actually really liked him. He was one of my favourite wrestlers at one point. He had zero charisma and wasn't very good on the mic, but he had a good look and he had quite severe. He had a beard, black trousers, fought with kendo sticks. He is now working as a bail bondsman, if the last time I checked his Wikipedia page is anything to be believed.
What, in real life? Or that's just
in real life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And just to clarify here, he fought with kendo sticks in the ring, surely not.
No. But I think that he was proper hard. I think like he was actually like a genuine hard man. I think he'd done like martial arts, like combat prior to that. But I think that he was a sort of one of the losers that listen to this podcast. They can discuss it in the Discord. But I think Blackman was the kind of wrestler who, if you were up and coming and you wanted to be like put through your paces a bit, they give you to Steve Blackman because he was actually hard. He didn't take any nonsense. I think the wrestlers might have been a little bit scared of him because he was just so serious.
Interesting. There you go. Quite often you mention wrestlers on this podcast and many others. Generally, I've heard of them. I haven't heard of that one before, but thank you.
Listen, there'll be somebody listening to this about to start their shift at Greg's and they'll be like, I remember the Lethal Weapon, Steve Blackman. Good look. Wasn't much of a competitor. Didn't get much of a rub, but he did have a way about him. And now he's a bail bondsman.
Oh, or maybe they're just pouring himself a drink in their whiskey room.
Either or, as long as you're listening, that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter where you're doing it. Belmarsh Prison, your whiskey room. Just as long as we have ears in this podcast, that's the most important thing. Shaughan, we did a podcast, myself, Craig Cairns, Tony Anderson did a podcast on Tuesday. It went out earlier today about the Scottish Cup, and one of the most eye-catching results was Raith Rovers beating Falkirk 2-1. You were there for it. How was it for you?
You know, so I did not see this result coming at all. Like, going into it, I'd said in the build-up, see if Raith has played well, bearing in mind how poor their away form has been this season. I mean, their home form has been okay for a team that's kind of struggled, but certainly their away form has been dreadful, and not just results but performances. So I thought, even if they'd lost and put in a good performance, I would take that, I suppose. But certainly that first half did not see that performance coming. And as much as Falkirk were probably the better team in the second half, I don't think you could. I don't think you could say that Raith weren't worthy winners, I suppose, too, and they might have just about deserved it. But I mean, there's not been too many games that I could say I really enjoyed that this season. Maybe the Falkirk game, when Raith won 2-0 on the Friday night. But no, I had a really good day. And until full time.
Yes,
until full
this is what I'm asking about. You were accosted by a fellow Raith Rovers supporter. So
there was an old guy that was maybe 4 rows in front. So I was right at the back. So it was me, bumped into a guy that I was at primary school with. We've been pals like forever. Didn't realise he was going. Ended up sitting next to him. So literally this old guy was maybe 4 rows in front of me, and at full time. So bear in mind, I've jumped up, I'm celebrating, I'm cheering, and he came running, whatever it was, the 4 or 5 rows, and he kind of jabbed his finger in my face and he shouted, "That shut your puss." and I was like, whoa. And I obviously I paused, I'm not entirely sure what's happening here. I don't really know what he means or why he said that. So I was kind of like shocked. And then I shouted, I think I said, "What the fuck do you mean by that?" Like, but then he just kind of sprinted away down the front. So he then just sprinted all, and it's a steep stair. Steep staircase at Falkirk. He sprinted all the way down the front, was kind of right at the front, and he was celebrating. So fair play to him. So then I was like, well, I don't really understand who he is or why he said that. So I was like, right, well, is it somebody I've fallen out in Pine Bovril? Maybe. The only other thing I think it could potentially be, if it wasn't that, is I don't know. I don't know if you're the same as me, but do you have stock phrases that you use at a game of football that you maybe use each and every week?
How do you mean? Give me an example.
Okay, so I have like, so let's say it's a foul, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say it's something I think is a foul, and the referee maybe doesn't book an opponent. I might shout, "Are we no playing any rules, referee?" Right?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So something like that. Now, I don't shout that much, and I certainly don't abuse or shout negative stuff about the Rovers, because I think it's probably not conducive to making them play any better. But there is something that I shout where, and it's very niche, I think. I can only use it in certain circumstances. It's when the game is still in a balance, and see if the opponent does something silly. Let's say they pass out of play, or they lump it forward and it goes out for a goal kick. I'll shout, "They're murder Rovers." Right? So I'll shout that. My pal, Derek, he goes, "I wonder if," he goes, "you shouted 3 or 4 times, 'They're murder Rovers.' I wonder if he's somehow misconstrued that as thinking that I was slagging off Raith Rovers rather than making a comment about Falkirk." So I don't know, but regardless, whether it was to do with Pine Bovril or whether it was to do with something I shouted on the day, I'm not entirely sure that his behaviour was cool, put it that way. No,
that's uncouth, especially sprinting away from you before you can seek a proper explanation. No, there was do you remember that when A View from the Terrace did the piece about Stennismuir winning the first ever league title in their 140-year history? They're not even discussing them in this show, and I still managed to get that in there. But do you remember they interviewed Donald Smiley on the show, the guy who'd been going to watch Stennismuir since the 60s?
Yep.
He used to get, when he was younger, certainly when I started going to football, very distinctive voice. You could hear him from a mile away. And anytime, you know in a game of football where you have conceded a series of fouls and then the referee gives you a foul and it's like, hey! Dom would do this thing, goes, hello! Like that. And he'd spread out his arms and he'd basically take out anyone that's sitting in front of him. It's now, I do this every week when I'm sitting in the back at Sterry. The two boys that sit next to me, Chris and Ewan, anytime we get a foul, hello, and just dive across their laps. It's so stupid. And unless you know the specific people we're talking about, it must sound really weird that you're diving across grown men's laps. But hello, and just sort of just like lean across them. Just been doing it all the time. Been doing it for years. The same two boys. Just hello and diving across them. So yes, very good stuff. Before we progress, Shaughan, we've got a correction and clarification. This is from the podcast last night. We had wondered how far Cove Rangers had ever progressed in the Scottish Cup. James on Twitter says the furthest stage they have got to was the 5th round. That was last season, and they were knocked out by Kilmarnock.
I'm glad we could clarify that.
I'm glad we got to the bottom of that. Now, although there were no games in the Championship, there are still a couple of things that we should discuss. And we're going to start with Falkirk. First up, we want to pass on our best wishes to Paul Smith. That's the Falkirk assistant manager. He suffered a heart attack after the game with Raith Rovers on Sunday, but he's recovered well and he's been looked after, and hope he's back in business as quickly as possible, really.
I think the suggestion was, not that I know anything about how it works in terms of in this scenario, but the suggestion was that they expect him to be out of hospital by the end of this week, so that sounds positive. But you're right, hopefully he takes as much time as he needs and he's back in the dugout as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Him and John McGlynn, excellent partnership that's been on the go for a number of years, and hope he's back able to oversee the team. And we'll stick with Falkirk, and this was something that broke. We're recording this on Wednesday, the 22nd of January. This is news that broke just about an hour or so ago. This is Callum Morrison has been reluctantly transfer listed by the club, as reported by Scott Burns in the Daily Record. He's usually pretty clued up with this kind of thing. And it looks like Morrison wants to leave despite having signed a new contract last season. Linfield were quite keen on him and he signed like a multi-year contract. What's your thoughts on this? Anything about the timing? Anything about the circumstances?
I suppose I can't quite figure out if, and it could be either, if it's, I get the impression that Scott Burns has fingers in many pies. So whether it's Falkirk making putting the story out there so that the kind of fans can expect the worst, I suppose, when he's eventually transferred, or if it's maybe Callum Morrison's agent who's putting the story out there because maybe Falkirk would be a wee bit difficult. I don't know, but regardless, I do think that is a blow to Falkirk, because I think I think maybe Calvin Miller's the best wide player. After that, it's Morrison. I do think Morrison's a better wide player than Ethan Ross and Alfie Agyeman. So I do think that will be a blow to Falkirk if he goes, and now it looks fairly certain that he will go in January. I didn't expect it. I suppose it is odd timing, but if somebody is in for him, whether it's at a higher level or whether they can pay higher wages, like Irish football at this moment in time seems to be spending a lot of money. So interesting to see if maybe it's there. I don't know. But we'll see.
Yeah, that was the impression that I got as well, especially when you are on Falkirk are now favourites to win the Premiership. If you're on the cusp of playing Premiership football next season, why would you want to give that up? Why would you want to leave the club? And that's the first thing I thought, that there has been talk of him linked to another club that can pay more money. That was, strangely enough, my first thought was Irish football, because there seems to be going through a bit of a financial sprouting. I don't know if that's the right term to use.
Sprouting's fine.
The money is sprouting in the Emerald Isle. That's where I thought he was going to go. And I just think for Falkirk's sake, he's one of their best players, if not the best player. He was certainly the best player in League One last season. Was it 23 goals he got for them? And he scored one of the goals of the season against Montrose to score from 30 yards in injury time to win the match for them. Just an absolutely extraordinary striking. And there are not many players that can do the same kind of things that he can, with those same game-changing qualities, be able to conjure stuff out of nothing. So I think for Falkirk's sake, you hope that, one, it's done very quickly and it minimises disruption, and you hope that it's done by this time next week. He is playing for I don't know, Shamrock Rovers or whoever, and the Falkirk can reinvest that money and sign a player of similar to quality. There's no one of similar quality off the top of my head that they could go in for, certainly not in Scottish football, but I don't work for Falkirk's recruitment department, so it's not my job to know these things. But yeah, a blow for Falkirk, and certainly a player who will not be easily replaced.
No, although in saying that, I suppose if there's any position that Falkirk could maybe lose a player, it might be their wide positions, but I fully appreciate that I've just said that Miller's the best one and Morrison's our second best, but they do have players that can do a turn in those wide areas. And
I think it has to be pointed out is that when Falkirk were arguably at their best form and between certainly the first half of the season, Morrison was unavailable through injury and they didn't really miss him.
Yeah. And likewise, I do think there is something to be said. Because I remember at the start of the season, we're like, Falkirk, they'll struggle with Ross McKeever. They'll struggle with Callum Morrison. And actually, they've done very, very well in the absence of some major players this season. So I think they'll be fine, but it will be interesting to see how they cope.
Sticking with mercurial wingers who have moved to Ireland, on last week's show we were talking about Queen's Park's transfer policy and the possibility that Dom Thomas might be departing the club. There's plenty of street talk about it, and yes, it came to pass. On Monday he joined Derry City, and there's also strong rumours that Jack Thompson is going to be leaving for Kilmarnock. Again, going by street talk, Callum Davidson is only allowed to bring in players who are 21 or under. And these could just be rumours, but given the sense of the atmosphere, the temperature coming out of Queen's Park, it's not unlikely that that's the case. And it just seemed a bit strange that the team, given the position and where they've got still a decent chance of finishing the top four, you would weaken the side without necessarily bringing in replacements who can fill in a job.
Yeah, I suppose that if you want to be positive about it, everything you've just said about when Callum Morrison was missing from the Falkirk team and how they managed to cope without him, as much as he's a very good player, you kind of say the same about Queen's Park with Dom Thomas. I think I know he improves the starting 11. However, when he has been missing, like they did go through a reasonably decent run of form, so they might be able to cope with it. I suppose what I would be worried about is what Callum Davidson said in that interview a couple of weeks ago that would reference the fact that I can't remember his exact quote, but it was something like and he was very much referencing, I suppose, the people behind the scenes. They have to decide exactly what we're going to do this season. And I think what he meant by that was, are we going to push for promotion or are we just going to try and remain in a division? And let's face it, if you're Callum Davidson, presumably you're a wee bit more ambitious than let's sell our best players in January. So that is presumably an issue between Davidson and the Spiders.
Yeah, there was, again, street talk that there was an interview conducted with the Queen's Park TV and he was quite critical of the transfer policy, and ultimately the video wasn't aired. Again, might just be street talk, but it just sparked something worth discussing. Remember when Roy Keane gave that interview to Manchester United television and slagged off all his teammates and was punted to Celtic? Is it something along those lines? Probably not. I don't think as many people care about Queen's Park as they do the Manchester United captain, but nevertheless, there are parallels there.
Aye, there's definitely, as there always is at Queen's Park, things aren't great behind the scenes. Like for about 5 years now, we've said that. However, they just seem to kind of like potter on and do quite well in the park. So fair play to them.
Yeah, definitely. And good to know about the multi-ball system that they're going to be using going forward. Now, Shaughan, let's actually get into the match action. We're going to start in League One, and this is a game that took place at Gallabang, a real six-pointer between Annan Athletic and Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Going into this match, the teams in 8th and 9th respectively were separated by 7 points. Victory vital for either side in the battle to avoid the relegation playoff place. And it was Cali Thistle that prevailed 3-0. Alfie Babbage and Keith Bray scoring 5 minutes either side of the interval. And Billy Mackay, washed as fuck, scored from the penalty spot late on. Annan are still in 8th. Cali Thistle are in 9th. There's 4 points between them. But Cali Thistle had a game in hand on Tuesday night, but they were beaten 3-2 by Queen of the South. It sounded like a very interesting game. They couldn't close the gap any further, but it only feels like a matter of time, I think, before Inverness actually do overtake Annan in 9th place. I think Cali Thistle could finish in 7th or 8th this season, but I definitely do think they'll finish above Annan.
I think so as well. Was it King Canute that attempted to hold back the sea?
The very same.
Yes, I think that's where that's what Annan are this season. I mean, I know we had the Scottish Cup took centre stage. Dundee Derby was I suppose the biggest game, but this was huge. Bear in mind, if Annan could have won this game, it would have been 10 points between them, and as much as Inverness have a bit of momentum, 10 points feels like quite the kind of gap to close. But my goodness, I don't know. I suppose there was a couple of Rovers games this season actually that were as one-sided, but based on a 6-minute highlights package, this was as one-sided as it could have been. There's maybe there was one passage of play where Annan had the ball in Inverness's half, and I think it was Cow about 45 yards from goal. So based on the fact that they closed the gap to 4 points, and the fact that Inverness now feel like or look like they're a top 4 side in terms of their performances and their results. You're right. I expect them to overtake Annan very soon. It was interesting listening to Willie Gibson as well. The fact that he called out a conversation that he had with an Annan fan, a disappointed Annan fan at full time doesn't augur well either.
No, we'll come on and talk about the managers. In fact, we'll talk about them just now. Yeah, I think Willie Gibson in his post-match interview basically said his players were let down by the basics and bemoaned the injuries that they've got. I think Rhys Breen was missing for this game. So Aidan Smith was missing from this game. I think he was suspended after the red card he picked up at Stennismuir. Tommy Goss is out long term. So Tam Muir had to play up front, and Tam Muir started his career as a striker. He's now, I think, exclusively a centre-back. And Luca Ross, who they've got on loan from Motherwell, was playing up front, but I think he's better out wide. And it just didn't work. It just didn't work for them at all. I think that's why they basically couldn't make the ball stick, and Inverness Caledonian Thistle were able to play the ball on their terms. But Gibson just looked angry throughout this entire match. I mean, one of the things, and what gives credence to that, I think this is the first time I'd watched highlights from a game at the Gallowbank where the camera position was right next to the dugouts rather than in the main stand. Mm-hmm. And for the first goal, for Bavich's goal, you can hear someone on the touchline. I'm going to assume it's Stevie Bell, the Annan assistant manager, and he's shouting at Ryan Muir, "Tight, help him. You've slowed him down. Engage." And this is Louis Longstaff's got the ball on the left flank. Ryan Muir has come out to engage with him, but doesn't read it properly. And then Longstaff's able to drop the shoulder, whip a ball in, and there's Alfie Bavich just comes steaming in and puts his head through the ball into the net, 1-0. Gibson is screaming at him. You watch it back a couple of times, Gibson is absolutely screaming at him. And this is something that he alludes to in his post-match interview, just that they can't do the basics properly. Like, he was talking about going out and, making things difficult for players, and certainly Ryan Muir doesn't do that. And having seen Ryan Muir a couple of times this season, it's not the first time that he's done that. He gives the impression to me that he's a winger, an attacker who's asked to fill in. That's how I get the impression from Annan's defence. It all feels like it's players that are filling in. The fact that Gibson is playing in defence for them, the fact that Tam Muir, as we mentioned there, who's a striker, is playing in there, it all feels very makeshift. And that's when you put makeshift players in there, these are the things that happen. Yeah,
and I've got a lot of sympathy for Gibson. So, as you say, they mentioned maybe 5 players that have been missing this season. And see, even if all of those players had been available, I still think that Annan would have had a struggle this season to stay in the division. And I know it doesn't look great, the fact that you've got Dumbarton and Inverness who have both had whatever it is, 15-point deductions because of administration. So that is not going to look well if Annan end up finishing behind one of them. But regardless, as it stands now, they have a kind of injury-ridden squad that probably wasn't that great to start with. Mm-hmm. So I do appreciate where he's coming from. However, regardless, how performances and results are looking, you do suspect he's probably in a bit of bother.
Yeah, they said they've got 2 players lined up to come in. He said he couldn't quite get them over the line because the managers wanted to keep them for the season. They needed them, so that might change probably as we were recording this podcast, Annan will have signed 2 new players. They brought one of the players that they have brought in here was Dan Carmichael from Dalbeattie Star, and he hasn't played in the SPFL since 2018 before dropping. I think he played West of Scotland football with Cumnock, has bounced about a wee bit, and he's had the chance to return after a spell at Dalbeattie. But he was a fantastic player with the Queen of the South team that won the old second division.
That was a long time ago.
Long time ago. He played alongside like Gavin Riley, Nicky Clark, Mark Durnan. They were an excellent side. But he's 34 now. I think he'd still be playing at this level had it not been for injuries. And to me, it's if that's the kind of player that you're looking to bring in. I mean, he did say himself, and this is something that actually a couple of managers said in their post-match interviews. It's not just about bringing players in for the sake of it. Mm-hmm. I think it was maybe we're obviously going to come on top of it, but at the Stranraer game, speaking afterwards, Chris Aitken in his post-match interview said that I could bring in like 10 guys right now, but they've got to be the right kind of player to come in and improve the squad. And I'm just not sure if Dan Carmichael is that. I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope I'm proven wrong. Obviously, I don't like just writing someone off, but 34 hasn't played for 6 years at this level. I don't know if he's the answer to their issues.
Aye, likewise. I mean, I have no idea how he's played. Similar to you, I have no idea how he's played over the last kind of 5 or 6 years. When the signing was announced, it was very much I recognise that name.
That guy.
But you. But likewise, I mean, when he went did he go to Queen of South to Hibs and then picked up an injury?
That was off the back of a right good season, and I think it was. I might be wrong, but I mean, injuries didn't help, and I think the fact that he's quite a small town boy. I think he's very much Dumfries based. Yeah. And I think moving to Edinburgh, I'm not saying it's like in Pinocchio when they go to Pleasure Island or anything like that, but perhaps the lifestyle didn't suit him and he's just better off being in Dumfries.
Well, listen, hopefully he does well, but I'd be pleasantly surprised, I suppose, if he makes a difference.
Yeah, and the other goals they lost as well. I mean, I've got my notes here that any time Longstaff was in the ball, he seemed to try and isolate Ryan Muir. There were a couple of times that he was able to get the better of them, whipping good balls. And then the other 2 goals as well, they're pretty straightforward from Cali Thistle's perspective. Just I think there's a Paul Allen corner. Keith Bray rise above Paul McGowan. Good header, right enough. I don't think the goalkeeper had no chance. Bavidge has another really good chance from a cross ball. It's a really good save by Smith. Gets down low to tip at the side. And I think that if you're the manager, the one you'd be like, for fuck's sake, the penalty that they lose, Bavidge, who, by the way, is turning into a pretty good signing for them. I think that's 3 goals in 3 games if you include the one that he scored on Tuesday night against Queens. Runs into the box, and Jai Stevenson just dives in and just catches him late. It's a stonewall penalty, and up steps Billy Mackay. Apparently, first penalty they've been awarded this season.
It was quite interesting listening to Billy Mackay's post-match interview, and he was saying that they'd been discussing before the game that Inverness and Rangers were the only 2 teams in the SPFL not to get a penalty this season. And I don't know if you noticed, I think it was Keith Bray. To see when the penalty was awarded, like Keith Bray just celebrated it, like really weird. Say, at last, is very much a celebration saying, at last we have a penalty this season. But you're right, just a kind of lazy challenge, the challenge of a player that probably had enough. I suppose that's how it felt when you watched it going in. But 3-0 was it didn't flatter. No, at all. That's the least it deserved.
Yeah, and just sticking with Billy Mackay's post-match interview, I'd much rather hear from Scott Kelleher in future, if that's okay, please. He's a lot more engaging. He's a lot more like, I think it was when they beat Cove Rangers, and it was all just, it was really passionate. He was really complimentary to the supporters, and it was all quite romantic and quite sentimental. I really liked that. Billy Mackay's too straight. He's too straight. We need more Scott Kelleher when we're doing these post-match interviews.
I think he was interviewed after the Queen of the South game, but I didn't listen to it just because there's no highlights of the Queen of the South game. But you're right, I would have preferred to listen to Killian. And fair play to the job he's doing. I mean, you think to how the Inverness fans were, how they regarded the job that Duncan Ferguson was doing at the end of last season and the start of this season. The fact that he's taken a squad of players that is arguably weaker than what Duncan Ferguson had, and turned them from a kind of a really dull, underperforming team to something that is quite the opposite, I suppose. Fair play to him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's no Cameron Ferguson to work with for a start, so that's obviously put him a massive disadvantage. But I think it's obviously he's got such a long association with the club, And given the circumstances that he's come into, where effectively keeping the club up, finishing in ninth, I think they'd be delighted if they finished in ninth place. Although, as I said, I think they'll end up finishing quite higher than that. But you go into administration, you have massive points deduction. You've got not a fantastic group of players to work with in the first place. Everyone is absolutely behind him. At the game when Stenny played them the other week, when they beat them 1-0. That was just before Christmas, when they beat them 1-0. The Inverness Caledonian Thistle fans, they did not stop singing his name. They did not stop singing his name. The backing that they've given the club, certainly since Ferguson moved on, has been fantastic, because I think that's all you really can do, is just get behind these group of players, because some of them are young, some of them might not be good enough, some of them might go on to be mainstays for this Caledonian Thistle side, we don't know, but that's all you can do, is just get behind them. And I think that Kelleher he'll have standards, and just being young isn't an excuse for daft things happening, for making mistakes. But I think that it's just he has got the personality and the position, the standing within that football club to pull everyone together and get them going in the right position. And I actually think that fan base might be one of the most unified in the country at the moment, just because it's like it's us against everyone else. We're in such a disadvantage, and that's all they've got. All you can do is just get behind these players, get behind the manager, and just sing their name, get them, try to give them that spirit that they can go on and win games. And I think that it's a bit cheesy to say that Inverness Caledonian Thistle fans are the 12th man, but I do think that they are a relatively large fan base. It does give them a slight advantage. No,
right. I think you're probably right. And in terms of, there's a kind of zeitgeist, I suppose, about the club at this moment in time, even, which is a weird thing to say, considering the position that they're in. But interesting to see if he maybe wants a kind of full-time managerial gig once Inverness are kind of hopefully out of admin, because at the moment it looks like he kind of knows what he's doing, essentially. Yeah. So interesting to see how his career progresses from here.
I think that the stuff that you've got to give him a lot of credit for, I'd say you've got to give him a lot of credit for. There was things when I was thinking, like the stuff that Duncan Ferguson did, they were very inhibited. I think that's something you'd say, very inhibited, where it felt a lot of the time, certainly the time that I went to see them, it was get the ball to Longstaff and he'll do something. And they just didn't look, I've said it before, they just didn't look a particularly well coached side. Whereas now you can see there's a real sense of purpose. I found it very interesting from having seen them at the fag end of Ferguson's time there, and the sort of the boom time under Kelleher. They just look a lot more vibrant under Kelleher. You've got guys like Paul Allen. Paul Allen at the moment, he's in good form. Probably one of the best central midfielders in League One on current form. Alfie Bavidge has been an excellent signing for them. Didn't have a particularly fantastic time at United in the first half of the season, but maybe another period in League One will benefit him, and that's exactly what we're getting. I mean, Billy Mackay said he's not even being played in his natural position. He's being played a bit wider. That's working dividends. You can just look at his goal return. Look at his performance in this game. He could have had, he won the penalty, could have another header that he scored there. Keith Bray, someone that was quite highly rated, didn't get much of a chance under Ferguson. Now he's a mainstay of the team, and it's like Danny Devine and Remy Savage. They're not just passing the ball between themselves all the time. They're actually giving the ball to midfielders with the aim of taking the ball further up the park. So just the whole club just feels a lot fresher and a lot more exuberant than it would have done 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the fact that Alfie Bavidge is now their joint top goal scorer, but he's only played 3 games for them. That tells you, I suppose, not only how well he has done since joining the club, but also just how passive Inverness were when Duncan Ferguson was there. Like they still keep the ball very well now under.
But it's got a point to it. They've got a point to what they're doing.
Exactly that. Yes, I mean they get forward really well rather than just slow and laborious, which it always felt like under Duncan Ferguson. Yeah, definitely,
and I think as well in Paul Allen. I mean, there's another assist from a corner. Really good set piece on him as well, and that's, if you're good at set pieces, then that's a massive bonus. So I can see it's a matter of time before Caledonian Thistle eventually overtake Annan. I think now for Caledonian Thistle, I think you'd offer them 8th place, given the circumstance, be like, aye, that's class. We will gladly take it. But who knows? 8th place, 7th place, maybe. We'll see. But they could have closed the gap, as we mentioned there. They could have closed the gap to Annan to a point, but they lost on Tuesday to Queen of the South. Sounded like a really entertaining encounter. A lot of back and forth with the teams. Both teams were leading at points, but Jordan Allen got his first goal for the Doonhamers, settled that encounter. Any thoughts on this other than just looking at the score?
Only that I suppose what it sounded like, a continuation, I suppose, of what we've just discussed about Inverness, but you can kind of lump on Queen of South with the same kind of topic, and that one of the criticisms of both teams is that either they were struggling to create chances or just didn't take their chances. But now it feels like, I know it's a strange thing to say because Queen of South, the games in the last 3, consider the last minute equaliser to Alloa. Yes, they've managed to beat Inverness, but they also lost to St Mirren. But see those 3 performances, like, played very well, created an abundance of chances. The fact they've brought in Jordan Allen, who managed to score the winner on Tuesday, maybe there is a turning point there because defensively, we've spoken about them all season, absolutely fine. It was the other side of the park that is the issue. Inverness are creating chances as well. So yes, it feels like those are 2 teams are on the up, maybe in League One. Yeah,
I think as well, Queen of South have got an absolutely sterling record at Palmerston as well. I think I read somewhere 26 points out of 30, possible 33.
They probably have the best home record in the division, but possibly the worst away record in the division.
I think it's comfortably the worst away record.
But that odd, it's a very strange comparison because they've done how well they perform and the results that they get at home.
It's not exactly like Fortress Recreation Park, you know. It's not like Welcome to Hell. It's like Andy Graham planting a flag in the middle of the park or anything like that. It's just Alloa. It's fine.
That wouldn't do much to the 4G planting a flag in the middle of the park.
No, it certainly wouldn't. And neither would throwing flares onto the pitch, and that hasn't stopped some of their fans in the past. Up next, Shaughan, Annan Athletic versus Montrose. This is quite an interesting encounter.
I think it will be a poor spectacle that Montrose will grind out a 1-0 win or maybe 0-0.
I think they were quite unfortunate against Queen's Park on the Scottish Cup. They're a better team. Blair Lions, very good performance from 2 goals. And another interesting game, Albion Athletic versus Inverness Caledonian Thistle.
Maybe it depends what kind of Alloa team turns up. Feels like they've been a wee bit inconsistent this season. I will go for maybe an away win, actually. Despite their poor away record, I might go for an away win.
I think Alloa need to see about getting Ethan Sutherland back on loan from St Mirren. That'll be the sort of signing that'll sort them out. Just before we move away from League One, Shaughan, the big news coming out of Fife, Charlie Mulgrew, new Kelty Hearts manager. He has replaced Michael Tidser, finally completed his remarkably protracted move to Dunfermline Athletic. Now, this is Mulgrew's first coaching gig, first management gig. How do you think he will fare, based on just pure gut feeling more than anything else? I
am a wee bit worried. I think Charlie Mulgrew is a good laugh. Whether he would be a good manager, I'm not sure. I suppose we'll find out. I think the best thing about this was how Kelty announced it. I don't know if you noticed. So it was it had a picture of Charlie Mulgrew and Mark Kerr, and it had in capital letters, big white font, welcome, Charlie. Everything's in capital letters so far. Then the and sign, and then Mark was in small letters. It's like, I appreciate he's the assistant manager, but maybe just put everything in large letters. Odd. I'm not so sure about the appointment. We'll see.
I suppose that you would say is that Kelty, that's perhaps the...
They take chances.
Are as a good chances. They'll take chances. I think that they quite like high-profile young managers making their first steps in the game. Barry Ferguson. I suppose he had been the Clyde manager beforehand, to be fair to him. But like Barry Ferguson, his second job. Kevin Thompson, his first job. Michael Tidser, his first job. I mean, heck, they even tried to rehabilitate John Potter's management career. That didn't quite work. But they will take risks. They will take chances. And I suppose that it'll be interesting to see what he does differently. I've said it on this podcast before. I think Kelty are one of the best pure footballing sides in that division. They've got a host of players right across the pitch that all just like to get on the ball and like to be direct. They like to run at people. They're good at passing the ball. They're good at working the ball amongst themselves. And I'll be keen to see what Charlie Mulgrew does. The impression I had, I think that when Dundee United were relegated, and this is just purely my own impression, I just think that when the going got tough, he didn't really...
Yeah,
I wasn't too impressed with him, and it's just my impression from seeing him. I think it was the game. Like Mark Birighitti was getting a lot of heat, obviously, in that game. But you're looking. This is a guy who's won league titles, who's won Scottish Cups with Celtic. We're looking for you to step up, and I just didn't feel he quite stepped up. So I don't know.
I suppose what he does have on his side, and I suppose it's quite unusual when you're a manager going into a club, because most clubs are getting rid of a manager who is failing. Whereas Kelty, that's not the case at Kelty. So at least he is going in and inheriting a really good team that perform well and are getting results. So I suppose he just has to keep them going rather than necessarily having to improve anything. But we'll see.
Yes, we will see. We will see indeed. And Shaughan and I, we will be there to talk about it. Well, not there, but we'll watch the highlights, watch the post-match interviews, and then just talk shite for 15 minutes. We'll drop into League Two, and again, I can only speak for myself here when I say that my coverage of League Two last week was absolutely abysmal. I'm determined to make up for it this time around, and I'm sure that the listeners will maybe get something entertaining from this rather than a man who sounded like... I felt like though I was doing the podcast after having 5 pints. That's the impression that gave off. And I can assure you that wasn't the case. We'll take a look at the 3 weekend matches, and we'll very briefly touch on Bonnyrigg Rose and the Spartans from Tuesday night. But we'll start by looking at the Friday night game between Clyde and Edinburgh City at New Douglas Park. It finished 2-0 to the Citizens. Lewis MacArthur scored in first half injury time, and Conor Young got his side second shortly after the restart with a close raiding finish. And the game also included one of the worst refereeing decisions, an absolute fucking clanger that I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, Shaughan, I was at this match. You are more than welcome to ask me questions about it, as well as chipping in with your own perspective.
I don't think it would be wrong to maybe start with the refereeing decision. What on earth was everybody making of it around you? So
basically what had happened was there was I think it might be Martin Rennie. I think Martin Rennie was offside, very clearly offside behind the Edinburgh defence. But there's a ball, I think Ray Grant clipped a ball over the top for Logan Dunnicky to run onto. Now Logan Dunnicky was very much onside. He actually walked through the Edinburgh defence to gather the ball. The linesman has his flag down, but the referee blows the whistle, puts his hand up to call offside. And when he's doing this, I think before he blows, Edinburgh stopped because they've seen what the referee's doing. Dunnicky puts the ball in the net. Mass confusion reigns because all the Clyde players come round them. They're all pointing at the linesman saying, he's not flagged for it. He's not flagged for it. What are you doing? The referee goes over to speak to his assistant, and at this point, everyone in the stadium, the Clyde fans are all going off their head. The Edinburgh supporters are just looking at each other like, what's going on? Darren Young's losing his head. Michael McIndoe's got his arms out like, what the fuck's going on here? He goes and speaks to his assistant. Then he goes and books Darren Young for being cheeky. Then he brings the ball under his arm, and like all the Edinburgh players have gone like to the centre circle, anticipating it's just a free kick, and Mark Weir's going to boot the ball at the park. But they're all called back because the referee's, I think he's given a drop ball or an indirect free kick. Nobody's got a clue what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the Edinburgh players just run back up the park because he's gone with his original decision and given the free kick. It was an absolute shambles. I think the referee will have realised very quickly he made a mistake. I think he was anticipating a flag to go up that wasn't going to come because Dunnicky wasn't offside. But he's given the call before the flag's gone up and thought, fucking hell, what have I done here? And then it's just made it up as he's gone along. And I reckon he'll be walking off that pitch wishing that the ground would completely swallow him up.
It almost felt like he knew that he'd made an error with his initial decision. Therefore, how could he give something or anything to Clyde? Because obviously you can't do either. Obviously you're just thinking like what was going on in his head, but it was an extraordinary 2 or 3 minutes. Did enjoy Clyde putting out, was it talking point or discussion point, and then it was just like the minute and a half or whatever of footage. Very funny.
It felt a lot longer than a minute and a half, but I suppose I mean that's what it felt like watching it from the stands. I'd hate to think what it'd been like for the referee. Must have felt like a good 24 minutes waiting for that to happen. It's absurd, man. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't like criticising referees because it's a difficult job, and someone's got to do it. And if you don't have referees, then ultimately you don't have a game. But I don't know about you, it just feels like the standards just is decreasing. Like particularly this season, it feels very noticeable this season.
Yeah, quite possible. I mean, like if you need whatever it is, another 6 VAR officials that need to move up from Championship to Premiership, then I suppose you then need to move another 5 or 6 officials up the divisions, and maybe end up with referees or officials that aren't quite ready. But yes, in terms of, I mean, I don't think I've seen anything as put. I mean, you see poor decisions every week. Like that's not the issue. It's how the referee then coped with giving a poor decision. That was odd. Yeah,
because I think, see if he called the offside and it's a free kick for Edinburgh, folk would be raging. Fine. I think it was the fact that it took that didn't help. That was it's a bad decision in the first instance, but the fact it took so long to clarify what had happened with, I think, everyone in the stand, everyone in the pitch, everyone in the dugouts, confused, bewildered. Not great.
And I suppose away from that moment, what about the game in general? Because I think it's funny, because I think in terms of these two teams, I keep thinking that Clyde will eventually come good, and I keep thinking that Edinburgh's bubble will burst. But I'm now starting to get to the point where I'm like, actually, no, maybe Edinburgh are just good and Clyde are just bad.
I'll start with Edinburgh, and I'm going to continue with my praise for this football club. I thought they were really good. I thought Edinburgh were really, really good, and I think they might be one of the best coach sides in the lower leagues. And I'm not just saying that because I find Michael McIndoe so compelling. I just think it's the fact that there is, if you want to compare the two teams, Clyde have had a lot of money spent on them. And I was speaking to someone at the game who, I mean, again, street talk, so I'm not 100% sure how much truth is, but he was telling me some of the wages that the Clyde players were on. Jaw-dropping. Like genuinely jaw-dropping when you hear how much like a squad player at Clyde is. Someone who, if you were thinking of Clyde's best 11, this guy wouldn't be in it. But he is on like a relatively very good salary. You're thinking, what on earth has happened there? And you compare that, I think his wages could probably play for about 5 Edinburgh players. Like these young guys that they're on. I'm going to assume the Edinburgh players are probably on about, in fact, I couldn't tell you, probably 100 quid a week or something like that. Maybe even less. But the fact that the Edinburgh don't have much to work with, but they are far greater than the sum of their parts. Like the team is just so well balanced and so well set up. I wrote in Pine Bovel, particularly in attack, where you've got Connor Young, who's the obvious standout, but you put Innes Lawson and you put James Stokes alongside him, who can do all the hard running and move defenders out the way to allow him to thrive. They're so good at that. And on top of that as well, the football is good to watch. There are a couple of moments in the first half. It's all one-touch passing. One-touch passing just to take the ball away from a Clyde player and move it into space. And you don't see many teams doing that. And I agreed with McIndoe in his post-match interview where he said he was really impressed by the team because they're finding different ways to win a game. You can't just pass your way around the team. Sometimes you've got to go long. Sometimes you've got to withstand a bit of pressure. And this is where the team are now. I completely agree with them. And I think that's what's so impressive about them, just at the fact that they look in really good shape to finish in the top 4. And I don't think that anyone would have given them a hope of achieving that at the beginning of the season. Certainly not me. Certainly not after when they played Clyde, actually, in the League Cup group stages and were completely obliterated by them.
Yeah, agreed. Despite the fact that Ali Moncrief has said on the terrace that I am in a group chat described as that Fife idiot, because I thought that Edinburgh would really, really struggle this season. I've got a real soft spot for them, so I did enjoy seeing this result coming through on the Friday, even in terms of goals. Like MacArthur's movement to kind of get a flick on at the first. I did enjoy the Clyde. I think it was a co-commentator that said, we need to watch what we're doing here. Can I go a goal down? And then within about 5 seconds, they were a goal down. And then the second goal, I mean, Connor Young is having a fantastic season. It was described as a lovely, deft flick. I do think if Robbie Hemfrey should have saved that.
I could see I was almost in line with it. He absolutely should have saved it. Yeah, I mean, the goals as well, the nature of the goals, I think that was, again, going by McIndoe's post-match interview, I think that was the first goal they scored from a set piece this season. Mm-hmm. But Lewis MacArthur, all he had to do was basically turn his head. It's like someone to the side of him said, "Lewis, what?" And he turns and the ball just flicked off his head and into the net. It was easy as that. I don't think he had to jump for it. I remember seeing, I think it was Jake Jarvis that put the ball into the box. I think that's quite a decent, oh yeah, it's in. And the second goal, it's a really good ball in from Quinn Mitchell. Quinn Mitchell had a really good game in this, and shout out Darren Mitchell as well. Got to catch up with him, and once again apologise for my conduct in Munich and for ruining his big day. So it was good to see him. Good to see him again, and I think he'll have been really, really impressed with Quinn's just overall performance with that ball that he put in. A really good ball, but yes, Hemfrey should have saved it. It's like, you ever tried to take something out of the oven and thinking you don't need to wear oven gloves, and you just completely, it was like that. And I think as well, it's really important, Shaughan, the timing of the goals as well, because you've got one in first half injury time. I think it's the 51st minute when Connor Young scores, and that really, I mean, Clyde's confidence at the moment is absolutely brittle, and those two goals, boom, like that. I mean, we talked about Dunnake's goal, the phantom goal with the crazy decision. At 2-1, that might have changed things. You don't know. This is something that Darren Young spoke about in his interview, and I'd probably agree with him, because we've been in that position ourselves. Seeing your team's largely comfortable and the opposition scores with about 15, 20 minutes to go, it can suddenly turn a straightforward game into a really antsy one. Clyde could have gone to take some from it. They might have even won it, but we don't know. After that, nothing happened in the match. It should be said that absolutely zero happened, but I thought Edinburgh deserved the win. I thought Edinburgh deserved to win. And
what about Clyde? Because it feels like they've got a wee bit weaker at this moment in the transfer window. There's still time for them to bring bodies in. I feel there is an upgrade in the dugout with Darren Young. Mm-hmm. I suspect they'll be fine. But what did you think of them? Seeing them in the flesh on Friday?
Poor. You've got to caveat it by the fact that they've got a ton of players missing. I mean, there's been they've lost 3 players last week. Jordan Allen had terminated his loan deal so he could go to Queen of the South. Andy Murdoch left to return to Ayr United, although I think what I've read, the door's open for him. The door's ajar for him to come back if they can work something out. And Marley Redfern is out for a long time. Yeah. I mean, up in the gallery at New Douglas Park, there's about 5 or 6 players in there who are all with various knocks and injuries that aren't able to contribute. So Darren Young, he doesn't have much to work with. But even so, they didn't really get going. Didn't really get going in the game at all. Up front, they had Martin Rennie and Kyle Connell. And about 20 minutes into the game, I saw a guy, Stuart Taylor. Stuart Taylor is the dad of Ross Taylor, the Stennismuir winger. And I know Stuart because Stuart goes to all the Stenny games, so I know him. So I came down and sat with him for the rest of the game, and Stuart's great company. And I was really close to the Edinburgh bench as well, so that was a dual attraction from that. But I went down and sat with Stuart. But prior to that, I was sitting in front of a group of boys who must have been about like 18, 19, 20, and they were looking at the game going on. And I think one of them said, "Fuck, is that Kyle Connell? He was fucking shite when he was with us." I think they were Airdrie fans. He had a loan spell from Kilmarnock a couple of years ago. I think one of them said, mind when we sent him back and wrote he was fucking rubbish, and his mum started giving me abuse on Twitter. So there you go. There's Kyle Connell's legacy as an Airdrie player. But he didn't contribute much in the match. I don't think he's particularly fit at the moment. Rennie, I always think Rennie does his best work as a wide forward. I don't think he's an out-and-out striker. And in the middle of the park, they didn't get going, and they tried to change things up midway through the second half. They brought on Craig Howie I think Connell went off and Dunnicky went up front, and it didn't really work, and they huffed and puffed a bit. And I just thought that Edinburgh were well worth their victory. I'd say that. Edinburgh were well worth their victory.
I mean, I suppose if between now and the end of the season, Clyde end up having a transitional season, which is a phrase I really don't like, but you absolutely would have taken that if you're a Clyde fan after, I don't know, the beginning of October, for example.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to have to do, because they've got a very expensively put together squad, but they're not getting value for money from it. And a lot of these big name players that they've got are just unavailable at the moment. So yeah, Darren Young is having to really make a silk purse with a sow's ear, and I think he's struggling. I do think they will just about finish up, but they're in desperate need of reinforcements. And you compare that to Edinburgh. There was a really interesting bit, and this maybe I should have brought this in when I was making the point about how well coached they are. But I think that McIndoe does seem like a bit of a weirdo in terms of what he wants from his players. You know what I mean? He's like, yeah. I don't think he is so serious. I think he actually might have slightly smiled in his post-match interview. And that was probably by accident. He probably didn't mean to do it. I think it's quite a bit of an affectation there, where you've got to be so serious, like you're not allowed to really let your guard down. But I think that the way they're coached, like for instance, there was a bit in that second half. It was 2-0, and the Clyde players were trying to build an attack from the back, and the players were looking to pass it in the midfield and were looking at options. And McIndoe was just screaming, work, 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 work at his forwards. And eventually you got Connor Young shutting down passing lanes. James Stokes comes into play to block off a chance. And ultimately it yielded a throw-in, like in the Edinburgh final third. And he's, giving them a clap for it. And it's just the demands he must put on his players, because he just does not shut up during the match. Anytime when the game's on, he's shouting. When there's a break in play, he's talking to specific players and passing on instruction to them. He takes it so seriously. And I suppose we're repeating points that we've said about McIndoe in the past. If you're managing Edinburgh and you don't have much to work with, you do have to take it seriously, because that's the only way that you're going to pull yourselves out of this situation. And it's totally working. I was disappointed that they lost to East Fife and then to Peterhead, because I think at that point they might have had like an unlikely title charge. Probably not going to happen now. I think we know who. I think it's more likely to be a top two than anything else. Elgin finishing third, and Edinburgh or Stirling Albion or Bonnyrigg or whoever might get that fourth spot. But the fact that they're in this promotion conversation, just remarkable stuff. Absolutely remarkable stuff.
I agreed. I had essentially written him off, but you're right. I have been pulled in by his team's performances and his interviews. He's an extraordinary character, and I thoroughly enjoy listening to him.
What he said? He said we're creating winning monsters in there. Yeah, he was talking about the players. Yeah, that's the first time we've won this week. Yeah, that's we're creating monsters in there. Great stuff, man. I'd say if there's one criticism, it's not so much a criticism. Tui Daramola came on, and obviously there's still a great degree of fascination around Daramola. I think he came on for James Stokes, and didn't really contribute much.
Have we ever got a player as wrong as Daramola? Possibly not.
Maybe Logan Dunnicky when we said he was the new Didier Drogba.
Those two then. Those two. That's a two.
But he came on. I mean, it was late on in the game, and he had a 1-on-1 with Lee Hamilton, and there was plenty of space. This was about 40 yards from goal, and what you're thinking is just kick the ball by him, because you're faster than him, and you're able to kick the ball by him, and you'll be able to run round and get him before Hemfrey can come out and try and block it. But he just seemed quite easy to play against. I don't think he's fully fit at the moment. I don't know how much he played for East Kilbride or Clydebank previously. However, if there is a manager who you think can coach him and get him up to speed, it'll probably be Michael McIndoe, because he's managed to do it with so many other players. And another guy as well, who's not spoken, Malik Zaid, best player in the park.
Yeah,
I don't know why it didn't work out for him at Annan, but seeing him at Edinburgh, he really brings something to that team that they don't necessarily have. I think a lot of the players in the Edinburgh midfield are all quite neat and tidy, and what they want to do is try and release the forward players, try and get a ball in for Stokes, or try and get Young in behind. But with Zaid, he just wants to dribble the ball. He's got that low centre of gravity. He can turn like a go-kart, like really, really quickly into space. And he's run, and it doesn't always come off for him, but it doesn't deter him. He's always looking to try and carry the ball forward. And he had a really good effort that hit the crossbar. It's one of those ones that dipped right at the last minute. But yeah, it was a good game. And Friday night games, you're seeing a lot of people that you like Dougie Imrie, Frank McEwen, Russell McLean, Mick Kennedy, Simon Ferry, Peter Grant Jr. I had to move past Peter Grant when I went down. Nearly his giant collar nearly took out my eye.
All the stars.
And before we move on, we have to say a big cheerio to Ebo, the Clyde kitman.
I have not listened to his interview, unfortunately, but yes, I did see that he had departed. Clyde.
His interview is quite sweet. You know, he finished and won the Bully Wee, which is a nice thing to say. And he's pursuing a full-time role with Crawley Town, which is amazing that he's got the opportunity to move from Clyde to Crawley. So he's leaving his family in Glasgow. He's going to give it a hand down south. And good luck to him. That sounds class. That sounds really, really good. If you can, to do something like that full time, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Who do you think is happier at that, him or his family?
I think Stranraer supporters. Up next, Clyde have got Elgin City at home.
I keep tipping Clyde to win, and it never goes. I'm always wrong, so I'll go for an away win.
I'm going for the law of averages. I'm going to go for Clyde to win this one. And we've got a repeat of the match that we saw a couple of weeks ago. It's East Fife versus Edinburgh City at Bayview.
East Fife's form is exemplary at this moment in time, so I will go for the Methil side.
Yeah, that's 5 wins in the bounce for them. Really good. I saw, we're going to come on and talk about it shortly, but Dick Campbell's post-match interview where he said he's really looking forward to playing. I said it in previous shows, him and Michael McIndoe, oil and water. Just two very different, if you're doing the spectrum of coaches, you've got someone that takes it so incredibly seriously, can't force himself to smile, and one who just thinks it's a great big laugh.
And one who's just trying to sell golf packages with his brother at hospitality for outrageous sums. To no avail.
To no avail, yeah. Aye, sorry. Maybe next time. Maybe next time. What if you asked Michael McIndoe, Michael, what's your tactics for the play? Just kick it up the park and just hope for the best when it gets into the final third. He'd be furious with you. Have you even suggested such a thing?
Kick it long, keep it there. Great stuff.
That's fine. We'll look at the two games from Saturday, and we'll start with this. Looked like an absolute humdinger at Balmoor between Peterhead and Stirling Albion. Finished 3-2 to the Blue Toon. Max Barry gave them the lead after 10 minutes, only for it to be cancelled out by Adam Brown, only for Kieran Shanks to put the home side ahead 3 minutes later. Callum Crane scored a great goal to equalise just after the interview, but Shanks got his second with 15 minutes remaining, and Peterhead recorded their third win on the bounce. 3 consecutive victories, all by the odd goal. They're still in second place, and Stirling Albion are in fifth. 7 points from the final playoff place, but crucially they've played 1 game fewer than Edinburgh above them. Shaughan, what did you think of this match? A match that was soundtracked by the sounds of shrieking children throughout.
I do have a note of that.
I hated this.
In my comments, it was just children screaming throughout the game. I think it maybe sums up why. So it looked class, and I do think it maybe sums up why I don't think Peterhead will end up winning this league. I think they might be the most fun team to watch, but I do think they just struggle to beat teams in a straightforward manner, whereas East Fife seem to manage to do that kind of week in, week out. But no, in terms of game, it looked class. And Kieran Shanks managed to grab a brace. Looks like that he is in a bit of a purple patch at this moment in time,
6 and 7.
Is obviously going to help going forward. But no, I had a really good game. Not necessarily fantastic goalkeeping, but a good game.
I suppose if you're going to blame the goalkeeper, you're talking about Peterhead's goalkeeper. Who, Yes, aye. I think it was for Crane shot. He tried to save it without using his arms. Maybe if I fall quickly enough, I might land on top of the ball here.
I mean, I've played in goals on that kind of Sunday amateur level. Wasn't very good, but what I did know is that I did have to use my arms.
Yeah,
it looks like Blessing Oluwayemi didn't know that.
Yes, I got the impression I thought Adam Britt, both actually Stirling Albion goals were really well worked. And then you'd watch them back and you think, hang on a second, this goalkeeper has no arms. I know what you mean about Peterhead being fun to watch. I actually think the best player, Kieran Shanks, will take the headlines because he scored 2 goals. I thought Kieran Dunn looked absolutely superb here. I think that he is, and this is something that Joel Sked said in his post-match interview, he was very effusive about, he looks identical to Joel Sked. Jordan Brown looks identical to Joel Sked. But he was very effusive in his praise for Kieran Dunn. Really pleased with his contribution. I mean, there's 2 of the goals, almost carbon copies of one another. Him bombing down that left flank, putting in a cross that was deflected, and it set up that Max Barry and then Kieran Shanks. But it looked as though any time he got in the ball, something fun was going to happen. And certainly going by that match, that looks like an area of the pitch where Peterhead are especially strong in the wide positions, especially on the left there, through Dunn, who's probably a player that's, for all intents and purposes, like quality-wise, you shouldn't be playing like part-time football in League One. You could probably be a Championship player. Yeah,
he's impressed for a while now. I don't know if you noticed. It might have been, was it when Stirling Albion got their equaliser? Maybe there was somebody. I don't know if you can make it out through the children screeching, but somebody shouted, "Come on, Peterhead!" And then he said, "Whacking up." I had no idea that in Peterhead the word "whacking" is used instead of waking up.
Whacking up sounds like something that you do with your girlfriend during an intimate moment. Oh man, did you get with her last night? Oh yeah, man, she was totally whacking me up. It was great. I didn't hear that, Shaughan. I found this a really difficult game to. I mean, on one hand, it looked like so much fun because, I mean, the highlights package is a 12 minutes highlights package put together by Peterhead. It's excellent. And it was like 12 minutes of just like absolutely rammed full of quality. It was like a greatest hits album, Sometimes we've seen like really long highlights where not much happens, but there was tons going on in this game. And I actually thought all the goals, in a way, were all really good, from like Dunn's runs down the left-hand side, although particularly for that first goal, Ross McGuigan just diving in, completely missing the ball and giving Dunn the cutback in it. I actually thought it deflected twice. The ball, it deflects once, and I think the deflection very favourable to Max Barry because I think it takes all the weight out it. So all he needs to do is just basically, it lands perfectly. He's about penalty spot, just runs into it, slams it into the net, great finish. And the Peterhead's second goal, Shanks' first, almost a carbon copy, skips down the left, plays a ball across the face of the goal. I mean, I think it's, I wasn't sure who it was, but it's not still an Albion player that stops Shanks from scoring. It's almost his own man who's on the line that almost has to jump out the way to let him finish.
He slide tackled his own player and the ball into the net. But you're right, though. It was like, I was trying to think what film it reminded me of. It was like, was it Jason Statham Crank?
I've never seen it.
It was just non-stop from start to finish action. Very, very good.
And you've got to say, I mean, that was really impressive. But the Stirling Albion's 2 goals, yes, there might have been question marks about Oyemi's handling of these goals, but really, really well worked. I mean, the first goal, like Adam Brown takes a throw in, and it's just worked down the right flank before James Graham cuts the ball back to him, and he sweeps it into the net. Again, don't want to be too harsh on the goalkeeper. He could have done better there. And that the second goal, Callum Crane's equaliser, that starts off with Derek Gaston. That's a goal kick. It starts off, it clipped into the midfield and headed, and it's a good ball outfoot from Shanley. And I thought that when I saw that goal, I thought, this can't be Callum Crane's goal. He's not going to score from here. It's a really well-angled, powerfully hit shot. Comes with that caveat, though, that perhaps the goalkeeper could have done a wee bit better. And
I do feel that Shanley's quite an interesting signing for Stirling, who was obviously involved in that goal. Didn't work out for him at Falkirk, but that feels like a good signing, and maybe it won't be enough for Albion to challenge for the top 4. Maybe it will, I'm not sure, but certainly an interesting signing.
Like, I've been quite impressed with the players that Stirling Albion have brought in as the season's gone on, because I think at the beginning of the campaign, you were looking at that team and thinking it's going to be very much a transitional season where it's a lot of young guys that have come in, augmented by some good experienced players. He signed the experienced players brought in, like Derek Gaston's a brilliant signing, and then you're kind of looking through the rest of the team and thinking, well, we'll see how we get on. But since then, Josh Kerr has come in. Josh Kerr should have scored in this game, actually, the header over the bar. Adam Brown has been a really good signing. And then you bring in Ryan Shanley, who maybe the step up to Falkirk. I think it was a difficult thing to go and play for that Falkirk team because Ross McKeever was going to start every week. Ross McKeever was fit and in good form, and you need someone to come in and be an alternative to that. And Shanley was only getting a couple of minutes here and there. And then you move into the Championship and you imagine his game time's even more limited. I think his performance against Stennismuir in the Challenge Cup, at that point you're thinking, well, it's not worked out. Let's just cut our losses here. However, for Stirling Albion, I think he could be a good sign. Once he's fit and he's up to speed, I think he'll be able to get the goals that can maybe claw back that gap between themselves and Edinburgh.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they'll quite manage it, but regardless, considering what we thought at the start of the season, then probably Stirling Albion have done okay, I suppose, all things considered.
I think so, but I'd say they'll be disappointed not to have done better in this because they had the chance. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous defending from Jamie Walker, but I mean ridiculous in just how good it is because there's a ball that's played across the face of the goal, and Jamie Walker, the fullback, somehow he slides in to block this low cross because if he doesn't get it, James Graham's got a tap in at the back post, but he somehow slides in and lands on top of it at the same time. And then he's able to get up in time and boot it away. It's an incredible piece of defending because the whole game could change at that point. And then in the next highlight, it's really good play from Shanks where I think he gets the ball fed into him and he does a really good wee bit of play to unbalanced Dayton Grant and the space opens up for him and it's a good finish. I think he might have been fouled there but still able to get the shot away. So these are the moments that go on. But there's, like we mentioned, Josh Kerr had a header, great ball in the box from Adam Brown. But then at the end, after that, probably about the last 15 minutes, Peterhead could have had 3 goals. McAllister came on as a sub. Misses a couple of good chances. You know, I'd really put a header past the post. Great ball in from Andy McCarthy. Then puts a shot past the post at the end. Shanks could have had a hat-trick.
Yeah. No, you're right. It could have been, based on those, whatever it was, 12 and a half minutes, it could have ended up being 7-5. Class.
Yeah, I think we mentioned Kieran Shanks at 6 and 7. I was looking at the goals. They're all important goals. They're all either open the scoring or they're winning goals. I think there's only one of the goals doesn't count in a way, but that was the second goal in a 2-0 win over, I think it was just check, was it Bonnyrigg? The second goal in a 2-0 win over Bonnyrigg, but that's the goal that puts the game beyond doubt. So it's all important. Funnily enough, contrast that with Adam Brown. Now, we mentioned about how good a signing he's been for Stirling Albion, just in terms of that degree of creativity he gives you in the final third. He's exemplary at set pieces, as we saw there with Josh Kerr's opportunity to score. Adam Brown's got 9 goals since he's come into the club. 3 of them have been against Peterhead. 3 of them have counted for fuck all because Peterhead have won all 3 matches.
He sounds like the equivalent of, remember Tory Andrew Flo when he was at Rangers? Almost all of his goals would be like the 5th in a 5-0 win against Motherwell. Who cares?
Yes. Aye, who cares? Who cares? Aye, but this was a really good game, and sadly there was no post-match interview from Alan Maybury, so we can't really get much of his thoughts. And Jordan Brown was just really chuffed. I think he was really chuffed. He said he praised his players' fitness, mentality, and quality because he said that in the space of a week, 8 days if you want to be arsey about it, 3 wins out of 3, all by the odd goal, and just really chuffed with his players. And he's just, I think they're really happy with this group of players that they've got, and I think they're looking to get them tied down on new contracts. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to do that, because it feels like after that difficult season with the relegation, I think that Peterhead are in a far better place than they were previously. Certainly on the pitch anyway.
I wondered if they did have the ability to kind of dig out a result. I was kind of starting to wonder about that, but you're right, over the last kind of week or so, then maybe they do. So yeah, maybe they can win the league, but I still fancy the Fifers.
Up next is Spartans versus Peterhead in Edinburgh.
Away win.
And Stirling Albion versus Bonnyrigg Rose.
Probably a draw.
Okay, very good, Shaughan. Now, our third and final League 2 match of the weekend took place at Stair Park, where Stranraer entertained the league leaders East Fife, and the match played out pretty much like you might have expected. Jack Healy put the visitors ahead after 15 minutes, and Alan Troughton doubled their lead shortly afterwards. East Fife, as you mentioned, they're on an absolute tear. They're 5th one in the bounce. They've consolidated top of the table. Stranraer, meanwhile, are in 9th. Immediate thoughts from this one?
I thought that East Fife, as much as there was not controversy about both goals, like the first goal was a deflection, there was certainly controversy about the second one, about whether it was handball from Scott Shepherd. But after that, didn't it really look like, because before East Fife opened the scoring, it looked like Stranraer certainly had chances in terms of Robbie Foster, Robbie Foster looks chaotic.
Yeah. But
he looks like his finishing is really poor. So he looks like he has the ability to get in behind the defence or cause them bother. But when he has opportunity, he struggles to take it.
Do you know who he looks like? You ever seen those things they do at half-time when they invite a fan onto the pitch? They get him to stand and hold a broom, spin around it 10 times and try to hit a penalty.
But after East Fife took the lead, didn't really look like Stranraer done much to try and get back. Well, not that they didn't do much, but just that they didn't have the ability to do much. So it felt like quite an easy win ultimately for East Fife.
Yeah, I thought they did start off the match quite well, Stranraer. They had the chance from, I think it was a couple of chances in the space of seconds there, like Scott Robertson finding himself inside the box, has a shot. Mm-hmm. The ball comes to Foster, has a shot, but both efforts are blocked. I think that Foster scooped the ball over the bar as well. Yeah. Still trying to find a way to break his duck, but then the 2 goals scored sort of quite quickly behind one another. First goal, it's Stranraer were just a bit careless with the ball on the edge of the box. They lose possession. It's worked out to Healy and a stroke a lot. Good effort from Healy, but it takes a massive deflection off Craig Ross and into the net. And there wasn't really much they could have done to prevent that, other than be a bit more careful with what you do. No,
although I suppose, and we've mentioned this before with other managers, but certainly Chris Aitken afterwards, he wasn't looking to make excuses. He was talking about what Stranraer could have done better, rather than lamenting the fact that it was a deflection or moaning about the fact that maybe they could have had a free kick in the build up to the second one. He was all about what Stranraer should have done better in the build up.
Second goal then, as you mentioned there, a bit of controversy there with a handball from Scott Shepherd. I think the ball bounces up and it looked as though it catches him on his tricep. And I wasn't sure, because the Lawrence Nelson and Brian Martin were adamant there was a handball. Yeah. Didn't really see many complaints from the Stranraer players, and I always think that's a sign if you see the players on the pitch. And they certainly didn't deal with it, because when you watch the goal taking place, everyone is so transfixed by Scott Shepherd. Little Alan Troughton just kind of daintily makes his way into the box, and when he gets fed the ball, I was watching the highlights, who the fuck's picking him up? Because he's given such an easy, he takes it and basically just gently, it's like watching Mr. Burns at bowling, the speed the ball's moving at, just passes it into the net. Infuriating. And I didn't think it was a handball, because I thought that is like,
I thought it hit his armpit
all day talking about it.
I thought it hit his armpit maybe.
Aye. And I think the players, the lack of protest on the players sums up. But I was more annoyed with the fact that no one picked up Troughton, who is by far and away the biggest goal threat on the pitch. And if you give him chances where no one marks him, where 3 players decide to go to Scott Shepherd and no one marks him, then it's all quite.
I can see why Lawrence and Brian were so dismayed at the officiating, but you're right. I thought it was more down to just poor defending from the Blues.
Yeah, and Stranraer seemed to be the better team in the second half. However, as I think Chris Aitken might have acknowledged in his post-match interview, the state of the game's changed by that point. You can afford to sit back a little bit and defend what you've got and just try and make things difficult. Stranraer, I just don't think Stranraer have got necessarily the quality to break it down. Again, something that Chris Aitken remarked is that there's an over-reliance on Mark Russell to do something, and I think that, well, that's a good thing to, if you've got a player who you can trust and you can rely on. It just makes everyone else around the problem solving skills aren't as good. You just give the ball to Mark Russell and let's see what happens.
And then, Stranraer probably have an okay squad. But then when you're relying on people like Darren Lang, for example, who came on, but then only lasted about 12 minutes, then he went off with a kind of re-emergence of his injury. That's the kind of reason, and that's the kind of scenario that is ultimately meaning that they can't move away from the bottom of the table. So I know we mention this a lot in the podcast, but this is the kind of performance that I'm like, wee bit worried about Stranraer.
Yeah, I do. Though I'm also worried about Forfar Athletic as well. I'm also a bit worried about Bonnie Rose, where I didn't see the game, but I heard their goalkeeper made an absolutely a big howler for Spartan's equaliser, and then at 2-8 Blair Carswell pulls off an amazing save to win a point for them. And I just don't feel as though that Stranraer are able to take advantage of these kind of things. I was going to think about Dick Campbell's post-match interview. You didn't really have... You're not getting much from a Dick Campbell's post-match interview, I don't think. When they lose, it's always quite entertaining when they lose. But when they win, I don't feel as though you learn all that much from the game. Yeah,
I mean, maybe if we are discussing a Dick Campbell post-match interview and not discussing it as such, then that's possibly a good thing in terms of how he's answered the questions.
Yeah, but I think that is just very pleased with the direction the team are going in, and so he should be, because 5 wins on the bounce. That's really credible, and I think we spoke about them last time, but comparison was made between them and the Stennismuir team last season that won the division, where they don't necessarily have an outstanding quality, but they do have. But there's no obvious weaknesses. They're just a good side. They're sort of, say, jack of all trades. No, they're master of all trades, but in a sort of a relatively decent League Two. I'm not saying the East Fife team could win the Champions League, but I'm saying they could win the League Two title. So I've very well played. And there's just on that, I see that Brian Martin and Lawrence Nelson, they are moving into vlogging.
Yes,
it's a new avenue for them. They went about interviewing supporters before the match.
Yeah, they interviewed school children, ultras, who I suppose are also school children, and former players who told them lies. I think that was funny.
Who's the former player that told them lies? The guy Pogo.
Yes.
It was great. It was, you know, what was really funny, the bit when they brought up the clip of him running onto the pitch in the last minute goal at Edinburgh. I thought that was really funny.
And they said, "Oh, do you invading a pitch?" Well, I've never invaded a pitch. And then literally showing him being escorted for Murrayfield. Very funny.
Yeah, there was a funny moment as well where they go into the bar that's in Stair Park, and someone shouts, "Someone's had a haircut" at Lawrence Nelson, who is very, very bald. That was quite funny.
Instantly have to wipe the camera because it's so steamy. Brian Martin's jacket, I was really impressed with that. His new jacket, really good.
Yes, they look the part. I was just worried though with Brian Lawrence. Are we not quite jumping the shark territory?
Don't jump the shark. I enjoyed it, but don't jump the shark.
Yeah, don't jump the shark, but I can see a large dorsal fin off in the horizon and some ominous music. As long as you just stay on that right side, that is fine. I think this just about manage it. Like, there's a bit where they're interviewing these completely unimpressed schoolgirls, and Lawrence Nelson says, Brian went to Stranraer Academy and he got the ducks from us, quack quack.
Rubbish, but it did make me laugh.
It did. Few people can get away with making a gag like that, but Brian Martin and Lawrence Nelson, they are two of the people that can do that. Up next, this is a massive game at the bottom of the table. It's Forfar Athletic versus Stranraer.
I think that Forfar will win this by like 1-0 or 2-1.
Yeah, I think it'll be an absolute abysmal game, but it feels like a 6-pointer. I think if Forfar lose it, then they really are adrift at the bottom of the table. So you wouldn't want to see either team finishing bottom. However, I have far more confidence in. It's funny. Remember when St Johnstone were like, you thought they were stick-ons to finish in 11th. Uh-huh. And you thought that Raith Rovers last season, Raith Rovers could go and beat them. But then it turned out to be Ross County, and thought, there's going to be no chance of them beating Ross County. I feel like whoever wins the the League 2 playoff team, the Highland League team and the Lowland League team. I'd fancy them to maybe beat Stranraer, but I wouldn't fancy them to beat Forfar.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I don't know why I can explain it, because obviously there's evidence. I was going to say there's evidence that I think Stranraer got very lucky in that match against East Kilbride, let's not forget.
I'd be interested to see as well in terms of what happens with Bonnyrigg, because I think by the end of this month, end of January, I think they had to prove that they had at the very, maybe it's both in terms of funding and a plan in terms of how they smooth out their ski slope of a pitch. So if they don't have that, and I don't know if they do, then whether they have further punishment, I'm not sure. It
seems unfair, given the expense involved in levelling that pitch. Then when did they get their points deducted? November?
Mm-hmm.
You give them 3 months. It just feels like that's just not a lot of time to be able to do that. I don't know, is that to say that work's going to start to do it? Because if it needs to be done by the end of the month, you better get your skates on and get that pitch dug up. I don't know the rules. I thought that I did think the points deduction was really harsh. I do think, I said that at the time, I think that the pulling them up for the state of their pitch, I do think that's something that needs to happen, but not a points deduction, I think. Because then, how do you want to take it? Do you want to go and punish, like, say give Dumbarton a points deduction? You already bloody have. But do you know what I mean? It's like the pitch at the Rock, if you watch the highlights and sports scene from their game with Airdrieonians, that pitch looks absolutely shocking, and it's just not conducive to any kind of spectacle. So I don't know what the answer is.
No, I mean, well, certainly, hopefully, Bonnyrigg do have a plan and do have some kind of funding in place, because you wouldn't want it to be a further points deduction. But I suppose I don't know what would be the punishment if they don't have a plan.
They've got to ground share with Edinburgh City at Meadowbank.
That's fine.
And the thing we mentioned there, East Fife, Edinburgh, I think we're both back in East Fife to get the win there.
Yeah, I mean, Edinburgh will probably play well, but you would imagine that East Fife will just have too much for them.
I think it was at the last time they met, it finished 4-2 to East Fife at Meadowbank, and it was just a complete collapse in the second half from Edinburgh, where they lost goals after 50 and 51 minutes.
Yeah, that was a midweek game a couple of weeks ago. Edinburgh were excellent first half and then kind of fell away second half.
Just sticking with East Fife, because they brought in 2 new players to the club. Callum Higginbotham is signed from Bonnyrigg.
Surprised at that. If I'm surprised based on the reason given about why he left Bonnyrigg in terms of his minutes, because it feels like he won't necessarily get more minutes at East Fife, especially if Nathan Austin's due back soon, which you expect that he will. But I suppose experience, maybe somebody that's decent to have around the dressing room, but I don't know if he'll necessarily play most weeks.
And speaking of guys who have just joined East Fife that won't play most, Bobby Jones has signed to the end of the season after a successful trial period, and it's a frightening world where Bobby Jones could be a league winner at the end of the season.
A good squad option.
Remember when David May in Barcelona, when Man United beat Bayern Munich, was wandering around with a Champions League trophy? This is the lower league equivalent of that.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Dear me. And as we mentioned there, Bonnyrigg and the Spartans played out a 2-each draw at New Dundas Park. Not really a result that does much for either side. Bonnyrigg quite not able to extricate themselves at the foot of the table, and Spartans, they do have a number of games in hand, but they can't quite close that gap in Edinburgh in 4th place. No, I mean, I think probably Edinburgh were the Edinburgh fans would be the most happy about that result in terms of neither were able to, well, they could only slightly close the gap between them and top 4. If there was any very glass half empty Edinburgh fan, then they weren't really dragged anywhere lower to the bottom of League 2. Yeah, definitely. And Shaughan, I think we will leave it at that. That's almost like an hour and a half. I think that's pretty good going. More than enough. And that's certainly better than the last podcast. I think if you listen to that podcast and you're like, oh, I didn't know that Callum Higginbotham had just signed for East Fife. Now you do. In fairness, he hadn't signed for East Fife the week before, so we couldn't talk about it. That's a very fair point. I hope you have learned something from this. Thank you very much. The fun continues on the Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Terrace Podcast, there are access to hours of bonus content for just as little as £2 a month. And really, what is £2 a month in this day and age? You're not going to get very far, so you might as well spend it on listening to bonus content about football.
Well, exactly.
Well, exactly. Shaughan will probably be back next week.
I'm away on holiday next week, so I can't
What
do
the
next week.
fuck, right? Oh Christ, they're going to stick me with one of the Make-A-Wish kids. That'll be fine. That'll be fine. I'm sure we'll find something to talk about next week. Thank you.
Well, good luck.
Thank you for dropping me on that, Shaughan. Well, listen, enjoy your football, but unlike Willie Gibson interacting with his teammates after they failed to close down an Inverness Caledonian Thistle winger when he's putting a ball in to open the scoring, please do so respectfully. Thank you very much. Take care. Goodbye. God bless.